Let's talk a little bit about my favorite character from Stellar Blade, Raven, and why sadly she's the one getting a little bit more shafted on paper on her kit because she's focused on damage to parts, but even then she should be able to do really good and still be probably one of the strongest characters we have when it comes to iron 100%. So as usual, before we start, hello the internet, welcome back to Waifus. I'm Sefhi, your favorite gambling addict. Today's topic, Raven and her kit, if it's worth putting for her or not. If we can't check her out on the union range or the shooting range today after reset, we will be checking her, but most likely we will not be able to even see her until she comes out in a couple of weeks. That said, let's talk a little bit about this. Leave a like, subscribe, comment for the channel, and let's get started with it. So we're gonna start with her assets, right? Always an important thing to check. Her assets are decent, I will say. Like, she has good jiggle. Her animation is one of the coolest we have in the game by far. Really cool animation. Her burst I don't like. This is the burst not worthy MLB in my opinion. Some people were saying, oh, Sefhi, it's a good reference to the game, and I'm like, bro, I don't care. I want the booty on my face. Alright? I'm the same. That's it, alright? To me, not worth the MLB because not a lot of fan service. Let's talk a little bit about her kit itself and why it's actually a decent kit. Attacker, B3, rocket launcher, iron. Iron is on a really weak spot. I already said this in my previous video talking about Eve, but again, they are the weakest element right now. They need good DPSs, so this is good for them. And when it comes to her kit itself, she has 2 passive and then her burst. As usual, a lot of characters recently have been getting passive skills plus the burst. I don't know why Shift Up is moving into this direction long term, where every character is 2 passives and the burst. They could have just changed this system from the get-go at the beginning and fixed a lot of the bad units we have, but it is what it is. Let's go into her kit. The skill 1 is called Shockwave, Blue Blade for the skill 2, and Tempest for the burst skill. Starting with the skill 1, activates when performing full charge attacks, affects 1 enemy unit nearest to the crosshair, deals 68% of final attack and sustained damage every second, stacks up to 10 times, lasting for 5 seconds. You should be able to get most of these stacks pretty easily because this is just on full charge. She's gonna be a character you can put on auto and forget about her, which is something I personally like, so you can manual someone else. And then when entering battle, she's also getting a 50% increase of caster's attack for 10 seconds. This is only for 10 seconds, which is whatever. She's gonna be getting a little bit more later on the burst, but still I would prefer if this was during the whole battle, similar to Eve and how many self buffs she's getting for free, right? But still is welcome. And skill 2 is when we go into the damage to parts, and something I personally dislike, but it is what it is. Even though her kit has this damage to parts, it's not everything focused around this. It's only this skill 2. And even though it's a good skill, you are still getting a lot more sustained damage on her burst. And we'll see that in a second. By the way, speaking on sustained damage, I'm not the biggest fan of sustained damage, but this means you could be making a really good team with her and Mihara. And we'll see what people come up with. There is still not a lot of buffers for sustained damage. Again, there is a few we can still use, but there is not a meta one for sustained, just like the mates. Just like you will be getting Grown with Helm or whatever you're putting her with, right? So you can make a really good team with Mihara and her. So skill 2, activates when entering battle, affects self, increasing damage to parts to 21% for 5 seconds. This is only 5 seconds and then it's gone. And then when entering Fell Burst, every single time you enter Fell Burst, she also gets damage to parts again, 21% for 5 seconds. This is pretty good, but ultra niche. We're talking about bosses with parts that are constantly respawning. Let's say Land Eater, right? It's a character, it's a boss you will be able to take advantage of because you can constantly get this damage to parts buff. But on bosses that have no parts, skill 2 becomes completely useless. And then activates when an ally or self destroys an enemy part, affects self if she's not on the NA mode, aka burst. A single point attack, sustained damage increased by 47% for 15 seconds, pretty good, and removes vital attack, this extra damage to parts. So you remove the damage to parts, but you in exchange gain sustained damage by 50%. It's a nice trade-off. Sustained damage is going to be better overall than just parts, so you can take advantage of this for 15 seconds. But again, this will only proc a couple times per battle depending on the boss. If it's a boss that constantly responds, this is a fantastic skill. If it's a boss without parts, this becomes completely useless. That's what it's like a little bit iffy, right? A little bit more situational already from the get-go. This also means she can be like a cheap character because you can completely ignore skill 2, leave it at level 4. Just for a little bit of CP padding and that's it. You can probably leave this at level 1 and you're still good probably. And then you have the burst, affects all enemies including parts, really good, dealing almost 500% of final attack as burst skill damage. And then you enter AN mode, removing the single point attack if you have it, aka this 50%, but you are gaining almost 90% sustained damage for 10 seconds, which is a lot better. So this is a character that is going to be cheap to build and to invest, because you can ignore the skill 2, go something like a 10-4-10, maybe like a 7-1-7 at the beginning if you are kind of low on resources. But it's a character that for bosses is going to be dealing really good damage thanks to the skill 1. Thanks to these full charge attacks, stacking the sustained damage. It's pretty similar to Mihara and her change. It looks like Shift Up is going for characters that can stack sustained damage to actually fix sustain. Because the previous characters that could deal sustained damage suck ass. They don't do enough sustained damage that you can actually be like, oh yeah, I want to use this character for sustain, right? I want to use this character because how good that sustain is. She's dealing on her burst attack and sustain damage. Basically, by the way, this is a better Sakura as well. So Sakura, she was already benched even for bosses with parts, now she's gonna be even more bench. In contrast to Eve, we might see Raven in more neutral content, because Eve has those two skills that are for electro-coded enemies. But Raven can be used probably everywhere, and we can find a good team for sustain with Mihara. So Mihara and Raven might be both together. A fitting team if you ask me, right? The BDSM queen and a bitch. So we'll see what people are cooking with those two. In my opinion, it's worth getting a copy of both. Again, just this skill 1 is going to be dealing a lot of damage on a 3-minute fight. And she's also increasing a 90% on full burst. I don't remember how much Mihara is increasing on her own, but I'm pretty sure it's pretty close to that here. Activates when entering person stage 3 itself a 60%, and she's already dealing really good damage, and Eve is increasing this by almost 90%. So in my opinion, worth getting a copy of both Raven and Eve, and also in my opinion, not worth getting the MLB, but that's coming from someone who clearly is not a competitive player. I don't care about my solo raid ranking, I just like collecting the characters, team building, and play around with the girls in-game. That's it, that's gonna be for this video. We're gonna be live pulling for Eve today, and then when Raven comes out in a couple of weeks, we'll also talk about her. As usual, beautiful people, thank you for watching my content. We reached 8k recently, nice. The aim for this year is to try to get to 10k, we'll see if it's possible or not. That said, as usual, love you all bastards, good luck with your pull dinner rates, I'll see you in the next one.